Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jesus in a Dream podcast, where we believe with Jesus in a Dream, anything is possible, nothing is impossible, and the possibilities are endless. I'm Caleb, this is Zach.
Hey everybody.
And we want you to enjoy life and build God's kingdom. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, would you please like and subscribe? If you're listening anywhere else to the podcast, would you please leave us a review? It helps out the podcast. And we want to help more people in more places. So that would be awesome. Love you so much. This is supposed to be our guest episode. Sad, our guest got sick today, which I'm really bummed about because I was excited to have her on, but we just roll, right? We're planning enough to be prepared, flexible enough to be led, and so we're ready to go with our guest episode with no guest. And so, but the title of this episode, if you clicked on it, is So You're Passionate About Your City. And so today, Zach and I are going to talk about how we got to Hastings, Minnesota, why it matters, and what our dreams are for the future, why we believe God has us here. So, Zach, does it make sense for me to go first since I got here first?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So, so I went to North Central University and graduated with a degree in youth development and had zero clue what I wanted to do. Thought I was going to be a server at this restaurant that I was working at. I was making good money. It was flexible. I was like, I'll just do this and pay off my debt. And I went home for my sister's graduation. She graduated high school the year I graduated college, and I actually preached at my dad's church, and I preached on Jochebed, who is Moses's mom, and the idea that God will call us to a place, but as we grow, he'll call us onward, but sometimes we want to stay because we believe God called us there, and then we get comfortable. And so I talked about how Jochebed saved Moses from being put into the river by the soldiers, but then when he got too big, he outgrew their home and was unable to stay quiet, so then she had to put him into the river, and it just made no sense. And so, but then obviously God had a plan and led him on and all these things. After I gave this message, a lady who I did not know walked up to me and said, I have a word from the Lord for you. You dream really big for other people, but not big enough for yourself. And I realized, I knew right then she was talking about me working at this restaurant. And before that, my buddy Jesse Italiano had gotten hired at Crossroads Church, which is a church here in Hastings, as a worship pastor. And the church had yet to start. It was going to start that December. And Jesse was like, hey, like they need a youth pastor. Like, you should apply. And I was like, nope. Don't give them my name. Don't give them my number. I am not interested. And when this lady said that to me, I was like, I bet it's that. And sure enough, a week later, Crossroads called me. I went in. I saw the church. But then I had an internship in Seattle. And I was hoping that I was going to get a job out in Seattle. But 3 weeks into, I should back up. So when I went to the main Crossroads campus, then the campus pastor of Hastings invited me down to Hastings. And so before I left to Seattle, I came down to Hastings. He just wanted to show me the town, meet me, all that good stuff. And Hastings has an iconic bridge, and how you get onto the bridge is you have to drive down a hill. So I came up over the hill and I saw this bridge, and immediately in my heart, I was like, this is home. And it's just like one of those feelings where you know that you know that you know. I met Tim. He showed me around Hastings. I loved it, but I still wanted to work out in Seattle. So I went on my internship, and about 3 weeks into my internship, I was like, nope, Minnesota's home. And in that way, or Hastings is home, I should say. And in that way, right from the beginning, from the time I set foot in Hastings, I was like, this is my city. These are my people. I don't know anybody yet, but I know that God is calling me here in whatever capacity he has for me. I understood that it was bigger than the youth pastor job because obviously our lives are more than our jobs. And so I knew that this community and these people was something that I knew I was called to and wanted the place to be better because I was there, but also wanted to have ownership of it as well. So I'll get into a little more of the story here in a bit, but I want to throw it over to Zach and kind of give him the opportunity to say how he got to Hastings and why he's here.
Yeah, I had never, ever been in Hastings, And the first time I came was one of the MyMountain worship nights at one of the churches here. And that was really fun. We got the time completely wrong. I showed up what I thought was on time, which was actually the last 30 minutes of the entire thing, which was kind of sad because I was really hyped. I invited people that came with me. And then I was like, oh, the time was like starting an hour and a half ago. But anyways, and then also, just looking backwards, you can see a lot of like pieces coming together or just things that felt insignificant, but I guess had some little bit of significance in there, because one of the things was a random networking group that I was invited to join for my business. And it made no sense that we met in Hastings, honestly.
And where were you living at the time?
In Apple Valley.
Okay,
and so I was in Apple Valley, and everyone from the networking group was Apple Valley, Lakeville area, except I think the reason was one person in the networking group was somebody from the space that we met in Hastings. So it was like, oh, well, you can use my space. And so then we were all there, and just like came a couple of weeks. And then after a while, that person, I don't know if they're able, like, whatever, it doesn't matter. We ended up moving it back to Apple Valley. And so I had like some exposure to Hastings and would just come out here and went out to eat a few times with the networking people. And so I was just getting more familiar with it, which I didn't know was a drive that I would be taking many, many, many times. But anyways, so then we started looking for a house because we were living with my wife's parents at the time at their house while we were looking to buy a house. It was 2021, so the housing market was absolutely crazy. Everyone was telling us that we should wait and we shouldn't be buying a house right now because it was... everybody's heard that it's crazy, and I will confirm that it was crazy. And if you didn't know what was happening, it was there just wasn't enough houses around. It was in the middle of COVID. People were scared to buy and sell in the first place. And so what was happening was you would have people going into houses, or not even going into houses, just buying them right off the bat, or even before they come on the market, and spending $50,000 more in cash just to secure it. And it was just chaos, absolute chaos. But me and Tori felt like we were just like gonna trust that it was our time to buy a house. And we just kept looking. And then that's when I was working with you more frequently. And then you were like, hey, dude, you should just live here, because then it'd be really great to work together. And so I was like, okay, I'll put it on the radar. And then, kind of the story of how I absolutely love our house. It's a small, cute house that's perfect for us. And so I'll kind of run through the details really quick, because I think God was definitely present through all those small details. So basically, we were in the middle of just looking for houses. We had our financing like ready to go, and we were working with a realtor who was absolutely awesome, and she was just killing it for us. And, we kind of landed on a price point that we were comfortable with based on like all the numbers and everything. And, we were just looking through houses, and it was just difficult because we didn't really put many offers in on stuff, because honestly, with the inflated prices of the houses and like what we could afford, and it was a lot of other people I knew that were looking for houses at that time basically gave up, and they're like, we're just not even going to look right now, because it's depressing, because you're going to pay a lot for something awful, right? So that's kind of what everyone was like. You either fight tooth and nail, and you just have to have a lot of cash to spend and basically make yourself house poor. And so it was just a bad situation for most people. And me and Tori were like, I think God's got a house for us. I think he does. And our realtor was saying the same thing. She's like, hey, if God can place you in a house, he can have a house ready for you, and we just have to like trust and believe and be obedient. And so it was really cool to have a realtor who could do that with us. And so we were out in Delaware visiting family, and I had to fly back a day early because I had a video job. And so I was kind of bummed. I was like, I'm leaving our vacation one day early, and just so happens right before I was flying back, we were just looking up houses, seeing what was coming on that week. A house shows up below our budget in Hastings, everything we wanted, looks great. And the day it comes on the market is the day I would be back, and then my video shoot canceled. So I was already like on my way back early. And so I had a free day. I was back, had nothing to do except go look at this house. I was like, might as well. Went and looked at the house and I was like, oh, this is great. Kind of meets everything we've been looking for. And we ran the numbers on the house and it came in below our budget, which meant that we could actually put in a really strong offer for 2021 when you either had a super strong offer or you didn't have an offer at all. And so we came in with a really strong offer, and because it's Hastings and we were looking, closer to the cities where stuff's just more expensive. And so being in Hastings, just the way the taxes are slightly different than Minneapolis, the property value, everything's slightly different, which worked out in our favor immensely. And so, I video chatted Tori and I was like, I think this might be the house. And she's like looking at it on the phone. And, then we put our offer in, all of it hinged on appraisal. And this was like the make or break for us, just the way we did our financing. And it's a very old house. I think it built in like the 60s ish. And the guy who used to live there upkept it amazingly, but then you have just all original 60s. It was an original 60s kitchen, which was the one thing we did want to change. And the amazing thing was we had like a couple $1,000s set aside because depending on where the appraisal comes in, you basically have to make up the difference in cash. The appraisal came in above our numbers, which means the bank would for sure loan us the money we needed, and we didn't have to spend any of our savings to secure the sale, which was awesome because then we immediately took that savings and remodeled the kitchen. And now we have a beautiful kitchen, and like the sale went great. There was nothing like that came out and like surprised us. And there was barely any offers on it, which was really weird. And we beat out a cash offer, which was insane and like never heard of because the cash offers always win. And yeah, it was just, I don't know, just everything. We were trying to be realistic about finding a house. And we said, there's only like 3 things we want, right? We want a backyard for our dogs. We want a nice space to host people, and we want to have like a good kitchen. And then the quiet neighborhood was a bonus. And so it was great. It was fantastic. And the other crazy thing looking back is that we wouldn't have been able to live where we are now without COVID, which is a weird thing to say. But because I was thinking about this the other day and I was like, if God gave us this house and if God wanted us to live in Hastings, okay, that makes sense. I can understand that. And then rewind 2 or 3 years, my wife this year just hit her 5-year anniversary working at her company. She loves her company. They're really good to us. And it was definitely God putting her in that place. Like she basically didn't have to apply, basically didn't really have to interview. It just went so unbelievably smooth that it was like, okay, yeah, God is in this. Like it came up and it happened, and then she was hired there. And so, but that's downtown Minneapolis. And so that's originally why we were like, okay, we're probably going to have to live in Minneapolis. And so then because of COVID, they moved her to a full-time can work from home if you want, which then enabled us to look further out, because if we're full-time working from home, you can basically live anywhere. So then Hastings is like 45 minutes from the cities if she has to go in. And so it was just like, oh, God like had a job for us, had a place for us, those 2 things wouldn't really work before COVID. So that means the timing had to just wait a little bit because God knew COVID was going to come through. He knew what was going to change because of COVID. And so now it's like, we just had to wait and navigate our way through it. And people were telling us to wait to buy a house, but I was like, no, I think now's the time. And, yeah, I don't know. It was just really, really cool. It was very scary in the middle of it and very frustrating because I will say one of the biggest things is that we were dead set on we're trusting God. I believe this is where God is leading us. But then you had people around you who had the facts. And that's what was really difficult, is you had people with the facts who were like, you should not be buying a house right now. Or on the flip side of like, well, you should be buying this type of a house. Or I don't know, there's just everybody who's like disagreeing with you and have very good arguments. And that's, I think, what was really difficult is, but anyways, all of that, we love where we're living right now. It's a great place. And it's just really cool to like be comfortable knowing, like, with that experience behind the house, knowing like, okay, no, if I do have questions of like, okay, maybe this isn't where I'm supposed to be right now, it's like, okay, no, I do know that like God's hand was in that. And so I can be comfortable right now knowing I'm in the right place. And I think that's really huge of like, when you go back and I don't know, that's a very biblical thing of when you go back and forth, like, what does God want? You kind of look back at, well, what has God done before? And it was cool to have something literally like last year, like God did something last year. So I can be comfortable knowing like, okay, no, this is where we're supposed to be. This is what we're supposed to do. So
that's really good. I think similar to your story, in my story, I didn't share this, but there's a million details that I was allowed to see that were revealed to me that got me to Hastings. And I don't want to go too much into that right now, but what I want to do is encourage 100% of the people who are listening to this. You are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And whether you've seen it or not, God opened and closed and took care of a million details for you to be where you're at right now. And I want to use that to then jump into the next section of our conversation and going, if we can see all of the work God did to get us here, then we cannot possibly squander this opportunity. We cannot look around us and go, well, there's nothing to do, or I'm just waiting here for the next step, or this is, just like a stepping stone into my future. Like God has put in so much work into his plan to get you placed exactly where you're at right now. And it might not feel like that, but I think that requires a mental shift and a paradigm shift. And while you're talking, I just read this verse today, just kind of randomly in Titus 3. Verse 14, it says, our people must learn to devote themselves to doing what is good in order to provide for urgent needs and not live unproductive lives. And as you were talking, I was connecting the dots of like, wow, like God is faithful in Zach's story. God is faithful in my story. Like something that we talk about all the time is we want to live productive lives. Like we don't want to just be like, okay, like what's next? We want to be like in what's next currently. And I think for Hastings, I love Hastings as a community. It's a beautiful community with beautiful people. There's a lot of really good things here. However, there are also a lot of problems. And I think for me, like how I would describe my passion for Hastings is I look at the problems in Hastings and I don't go, well, that's somebody else's problem. Like I look at the high suicide rate. I look at the overdoses on fentanyl. I look at kind of a fractured education system. I look at like the pain of like small businesses shutting down. And whenever I run into those things, it's not just that I'm like reading about these things on Facebook or in the newspaper or online. It's like, these are real stories, like real everyday stories of people that I am running into at church, at the grocery store, at the coffee shop that are like, this is what's happening in my life. And I believe the Lord has just placed this passion within me that like every time somebody shares a struggle, that he has just given me the grace and the power to be like, to speak into it and to hopefully let them know that like, even if I can't like fix it, like pay $1 million to get their business up and going, or like I can't bring back a dead mom, or I can't like, arrest the person who's dealing fentanyl, at least I can stand with these people and go like, no, like you are my people. Like you might not like share the same faith as me or the same outlook on life as me, but you share like the same soil as me. And like, this is Hastings. And like, I want Hastings to be a better place. And some of the ways I've seen God like move through that is just like simple conversations where mostly in coffee shops where somebody will share bad news with me, and then I just get an opportunity to go, like I'm with you in that, or like, can I pray for you? Can I just like give you a hug, or like, oh man, I went through something like that as well. Like, here's what I learned, or just know that, yeah, you're not alone in this. And I've just had so many cool opportunities. I think because I placed myself in this position of going, I'm passionate for this city. I believe that I'm called to the city. And that doesn't look like being a youth pastor. And that doesn't look like being the executive director at MyMountain. It just means that like God has called me to these people in this particular place. And that's been just really cool for me that like I feel like I've been let into a lot of very intimate parts of strangers' lives, but they're not strangers, as they're neighbors. Like they're my insurance agent. They're the lady in the drive-thru. They are, you name it, a former like youth leader or current volunteers for My Mountain. And I just believe that there is a blessing on people when they go like, who is my neighbor? And then when God shows them that, like the Good Samaritan, it's just like that. And that's not for me to toot my own horn in any way, but that's just to say, like, God is faithful to his word, that like he has placed people around you in your city whose lives you can have an impact in, even if you don't have a formal title or job position or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment on that really quickly about just the difference of how like viewing the city and the people makes just a big difference in your own like everyday life and attitude, and just like you said, you feel compassionate for the people. I'll contrast that with when I lived in St. Paul. I lived in a duplex. It was fine. Our landlord was an interesting guy, but it was all good. And I remember I would get so mad at just St. Paul in general because the roads were terrible on our street. It was just like falling apart, and they would just never fix anything. And the complaint in Minnesota is, it's either winter or it's road construction. And I was like, bring me the road construction. Like, we need it here. And they just wouldn't plow our street. And like, it was just very frustrating. And yeah, just all these different things. I would just get mad at, like, oh, St. Paul, like, I wish I could grab somebody and be like, listen, like, can you please just do this one thing for me? And anybody listening who's in St. Paul, the trash problem, what a nightmare. I feel you guys. There's a whole ridiculousness about, they like switched over how they manage trash and recycling, and it was just a nightmare for everybody. And so that just added to the frustration, because then our landlord was like, oh, I need you guys to do this. And then I would be calling the whoever was in charge of that for the city. And it's just, so yeah, that was just me just like angry and frustrated at St. Paul. And if St. Paul, it's funny, it's named St. Paul, but if St. Paul, the city of St. Paul was a person, like, I would just like grab them and be like, listen, I've got some words for you. Right. And yet the difference is now viewing that as like, to contrast, like being in Hastings, now it's a different feel. Obviously the city is it's a different city, but like you said, like if I feel like I'm supposed to be here, it changes, because seeing the problems creates not anger, but like compassion, which is like, feels similar to anger sometimes, which I think is like the righteous anger side, you can call it, or just zealous, I guess. And like very like, you want to change it. And I think, it's because you care so much that you see like where it could be better. You want it to be better. And so you're not going to overlook problems, and you're not just going to let them slide or just be angry at them or just complain about them, because you're like, no, like, we can change this. We should change this. We should try and change this. We should try and change these problems because you care. Whereas I didn't care about St. Paul. Like when I lived there, I was like, I don't care. I'm probably going to move out of here. And so for me, it was just angry and complaining. And like all the problems, I wasn't going around like, let's figure out a solution. I'm going to go and like shovel my neighbor's driveway because the plows don't come through. I didn't do that. I probably should have, but I didn't, because I was like, that's the city's problem. It's like it. And I think that's what Christ calls us to, why it's like different to be a Christian, is because Christ is like, yeah, don't just sit there and complain and be angry, because everybody can do that and it's easy to do. And and it's like, I'm not calling you to do that. Calling you to have a different attitude towards it. But
yeah, that's really good. And I think we're going to have a really, really great discussion in the expansion pack, because I think you just hit the nail on the head of like, what does it mean to be a Christian and somebody's neighbor? Because Jesus illustrates it. Maybe we'll just do a deep dive into like the Good Samaritan, because Jesus just straight up illustrates. It's like, yeah, like neighbor is like a physical thing. It's people in close proximity to you, but to be like to love your neighbor, to be a God follower, and he was talking to like the Jewish people, but then also to be a Christian, it's escalated then of like, what does that mean? And I think the reason that we can be a good Samaritan, I think we will break this down in like the expansion pack, but this is the point I want to make right now, is the reason we can be good neighbors and loving neighbors and compassionate neighbors is because we carry hope with us. It's really easy to complain when you think that a brighter future could or could not happen. It's a 50-50 shot of like your street potholes being filled in. And so I'm just going to complain about the potholes. I'm going to complain about the trash problem. And, I'm not like picking on you in this, but like, this is just like a posture of like, I don't know if it's going to happen or not. So I'm just going to comment on it. And I think for us being Christians, it's like, man, we have a hope that is promised. We have a power within us that is guaranteed. We have wisdom that comes from the God of the universe. So when we see these issues and when we see these problems and when we look at our cities and see broken people and broken systems, we shouldn't just be like, that sucks. It's
someone
like
should do
someone
something.
should do something about this. And yeah, it's somebody else like responsibility. And again, when we break down the Good Samaritan, Jesus is going, like, hey, like if you notice it, it's your problem, basically. And the reason that you can carry that is because one, you have hope in who I am, and you know that I'm going to help you out with it. And you know that I did this for you. Like I didn't just complain, people, they suck. Like he was like, no, I'm going to bring hope to them, and I'm going to have compassion on them. I love that you use that word, because I think that is the operative word in being passionate about your city, is being compassionate about your city and about your neighbor. And so, I think having hope, which we both have for the city, we really believe that because we're here, like God is going to make Hastings a better place. And that is not arrogant or self-centered. It's just believing that we're going to be used as vessels and that God has called us here and that we can see his faithfulness in the past, like you were saying, to believe that, okay, he's made a way for us, so we can make a way for other people. And that in turn will hopefully make Hastings a better place and a more loving place and a more godly place.
I will say, this is a little bit off topic here, but it is, maybe not. It is fantastic to finally be a regular at a coffee shop where, first of all, I spend way too much money on coffee. Do not follow this. Follow my spending on coffee. But it is great to like show up to Caribou or wherever and people recognize me and they're like, "Oh, Zach, I've got your drink right over here." And I was like, "Oh, this is great. I've literally never had that before." And it feels fantastic. And I think that's where it's like, yeah, and I think the difference too is just I have literally never settled down in my entire like life story, as I've never been in one place for more than 4 years in there. So I think that's where the changing my own mindset has been a really big part of like, I'm here at Hastings, a place I'm supposed to be. It might be temporary, but as far as I know right now, it's where I'm supposed to be now. So I shouldn't like treat it as a temporary spot. And the other thing too is just like thinking like you said, yeah, these people are my neighbors. Like these, I'm going to see them again and again and again and again at Caribou because they work there. As long as they work there, I'll probably see them when I stop in for coffee. And so versus, when I was in St. Paul or in Minneapolis, like you're just different place. There's just so many people that I just didn't, you just kind of take that like, you're a stranger and I'm a stranger to you, and we're just both going to leave it at that, and it just like, we've both come into this agreement that we're both never going to see each other again. And that's not a good thing to have in mind when you're thinking, okay, I need to care for people. I need to treat people. And when someone does step out, sometimes your reaction is like, whoa, dude, we're just strangers. Like, that's weird. It's like, oh, you're being extra nice to me at my coffee. Thanks. Bye. It's like, whereas now I have to like push myself to be like, okay, no, I could get to know every single one of these people's names because I'm going to see them tomorrow. And maybe, like how many times am I going to see these people, right? How many times am I going to get coffee? I'm going to see these people. And so, just thinking that of like, yeah, that when I get my car worked on, I'm probably going to see them again next time I'm back. And just like thinking differently in that sense versus, so quick life story. If you guys didn't know, what I'm contrasting this to is, I was born in Stillwater, and then we moved to Baldwin, where I was on a farm until I was 4 years old, and then we moved to China, where I lived in China for a couple years, lived in the Philippines for a year, and then came back, lived in Faribault for a year, and then I was in Faribault, Minnesota. Then I was in Northfield, Minnesota for a couple more years in high school, and then I was in college, and now then I lived in Minneapolis, and then I lived in St. Paul, and so now I'm in Hastings. So it's like I have never been in a place of like settling or a place of permanence. And so I think that's also just a big change for me, is like understanding. But I think in all of those places previously, I think God, I was there for a reason. I think I learned insane amounts of stuff. Just like being in China is just, I don't know, being anywhere in another country will always open your eyes up a little bit more. But yeah, I think that's, and I think, I don't know, I've definitely never felt like I feel here, where it's that like, okay, no, like this is a place I'm going to be. These are people I'm going to see. I should care for these people. I shouldn't treat them like strangers, because I don't want them to treat me like strangers. I'd love for them to be excited that a new person has come to the community. You know, it's definitely an older community. Literally all of my neighbors have been there for 30 plus years. It's crazy. Even the younger people, like 2 streets down from me, they're like, yeah, we bought this from our parents. So I literally grew up in the house I'm living in right now. I was like, that's insane. Yeah, that's so crazy. And yeah, and everyone's just really nice and like, oh, we're so happy to have more people in Hastings. And I think that's just, I don't know. It's a great city. I try and convince everyone to move to Hastings. But
move to Hastings. If you're thinking about a place to live, move to Hastings. We will gladly welcome you into the community. I'll wrap up with this point, because I think Zach illustrated it well, is that being passionate and compassionate for your city is not a passive thing. Like, it has to take an intentionality of going, I care about these people. Even if I do never see them again, like, I believe we're in the same place in this coffee shop at the same time for a reason. You don't have to over spiritualize it, but you know, this is where, like, this is what I mean by intentionality. I had to tell myself at one point in life, I think it was in college, where it's like, when I walk up to a register or a counter, I'm just going to say, hi, how are you today? Instead of going, can I have a number 2? Or give me a number 2? Or, you know. And I think I learned that because I was on the opposite side of the counter, when people just walk up and you go, hi, and they just go, give me a number 2. It's like, I am a robot. I live to please. Like, come on, dude. Like, and so I remember me making that conscious decision that I'm going to make eye contact. I'm going to say hello, and I'm going to ask people how they are. And whether they respond to me or not, like, it's not about that. It's about, am I intentionally living in a way that acknowledges another human being? And I think that's like the bare minimum for us as like Christians. I'm not saying that's not what you're doing. The point I'm trying to make is it takes an intentional decision to live passionately for your city. Like, that's what we want to encourage people to do, because we believe God has called you to wherever you're at to do whatever it is. But if you want to elevate your impact, and I think even like your quality of life, making that intentional decision that everybody is my neighbor, whether I'm here for 2 seconds or 50 years, God has me here for a reason, and I want to see those reasons. I don't want to just passively live my life. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that before we wrap up. But
nope.
Sweet. Good episode. This was fun. We hope that you're passionate about where God has you, because I believe when you're passionate about where God has you, 100% of people who follow Jesus will be passionate about at least something, because everybody lives. And so whatever season you're in, whether you're living on the mountaintop with where you're living, or you feel like you're just passing through, or whether you're in the valley, I just want to challenge you, be passionate about your neighbor. And we'll explain why in the next episode. So we'll see you then. Love you guys. We'll see you next time.